She wasn't just wet. She was shattered. Claire Mendoza, the housemaid so quiet the entire mansion believed she was mute, was curled up before the black iron gates in the freezing Boston rain at 1:13 in the morning. She didn't beg to be let in. She didn't try to explain. When Vincent Marcello, the man the city both feared and revered, stepped outside, she whispered a single sentence, her voice hoarse and broken. "They destroyed my brother's life over a lie, and they said it was on your orders." She didn't know that the man staring at her with eyes that hadn't trusted a soul in over 10 years was someone who had crushed traitors without blinking. And tonight, she was about to become the only person he couldn't afford to lose. Vincent stood motionless, his polished black shoes half submerged in puddles, gray eyes fixed on the woman trembling beneath the dim golden gate light. She shouldn't be here. Not at this hour. Not like this. Her coat was soaked through, dark hair plastered to her face, rain and tears indistinguishable on her cheeks. She was shaking not just from the cold. He recognized that look. It was the gaze of someone who had lost everything yet still clung to the faintest thread of hope, defying pride itself. Claire said nothing more. She only lowered her head, as if her very existence was something she ought to apologize for. Vincent drew a long breath, his hands tightening inside his coat pockets. Questions flashed through his mind. Why was she here? Who told her he was behind her brother's ruin? Who dared to use his name to destroy an innocent? And most of all, why did his chest feel heavier with every second he looked at her? Claire had no idea she had just lit the fuse to a storm that would shake the entire underworld of Boston. She didn't know that the man standing before her, the one the city spoke of in whispers, the infamous Marcello, had once sworn never to let emotion rule him again after his wife's death. Yet her trembling voice, her words about a falsely accused brother, and those eyes that looked like they had nothing left to lose, all of it struck something deep within him. It wasn't pity. It was instinct, a raw certainty that she wasn't lying, and that someone inside his empire was playing a dangerous game behind his back. He unlocked the gate. Not a word, just a nod. She rose slowly, as if each movement cost her pain and strength she barely had left. When she passed him, she bowed her head, unable to meet his eyes. But Vincent saw them clearly, eyes that did not plead, only pain and resolve. He turned toward the faintly lit mansion and began walking. Claire followed, her canvas shoes squelching against the rain-soaked stone. The door closed behind them. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, another kind of storm was forming, not of bullets, but of truth. And Vincent knew that when a woman like Claire was forced to speak, it meant something had already begun to rot deep within the empire he had ruled with an iron hand. If you've made it this far, take a moment to subscribe to Underworld Love Stories. Hit the like button and share this video so you won't miss the tales where darkness, guilt, and loyalty intertwine like threads of fate. Each day, we bring you stories that walk the thin line between humanity and destiny, between sin and redemption. And you, where are you listening from? Leave a comment and tell us the place you're in, so we'll know how far this story has traveled. From the rain-soaked streets of Boston to the city where you now sit, in the quiet of the night, listening to the rain fall in rhythm with a heart that has never truly slept. Vincent Marcello didn't lead Claire into the living room, nor did he call for a servant to bring towels or hot tea, the way a decent host might have. He merely gestured for her to sit on the wooden chair near the fireplace, then quietly poured 2 glasses of whiskey, setting one in front of her without asking if she wanted it. Claire didn't touch the drink. She sat still, hands resting on her knees, eyes fixed on the flames, as though that fragile warmth were the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Vincent sat opposite her, his armchair resembling an old throne draped in the dust of time. He watched her, yet his mind had already drifted back to the past, to another woman who had once sat in that very spot. on a winter night, nearly 20 years ago. Lucia, his wife, had been the last person to make him believe the world still held something worth trusting. She wasn't from his world. She knew nothing of dirty money, of guns, of deals struck beneath the table. Lucia was a grade school teacher, her chestnut hair always smelling faintly of mint, her eyes smiling even when he came home with dried blood on his cuff. She knew who he was, but she loved what was left of him, the part Vincent himself didn't know still existed. They were married in autumn. Lucia wore a simple white dress, holding a bouquet of wild daisies, and spoke her vows in a trembling whisper. Vincent had never trembled when pulling a trigger, but that day, his hands shook as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He swore to himself that he would keep her untouched by the filth and the danger of his world. But his world allowed no such mercy. The assassination meant for him took place at an intersection just a few blocks from their home. Lucia happened to be returning from the market when the car exploded. Vincent survived. His bodyguard had been the one behind the wheel. Lucia did not. A piece of shrapnel struck her throat as she ran toward the burning car, calling his name. She died in his arms minutes later, her blood spilling across the pavement, mingling with rain and motor oil. The mastermind was never found. Vincent didn't need to find him. From the day Lucia died, he wiped out everyone who might have been involved, guilty, innocent. It didn't matter. He wanted to punish the world itself for daring to take the only person he ever trusted. From that moment, Vincent let no one close again. No one entered his living room without reason. No one sat in the chair Lucia had once sat in. And no one, absolutely no one, dared speak the word trust in his presence. To Vincent, trust had become a luxury, fragile, foolish, and deadly. His organization grew infamous for its discipline and fear, but everyone within it knew one thing. Don Marcello never forgave betrayal, not even the flicker of a doubtful glance or the pause before a sentence. And so tonight, when Claire Mendoza sat there in the sacred space that belonged to memory and told him that his name had been used to destroy her brother's life, something deep within Vincent stirred from the ashes. He didn't believe her. Not yet. But he trusted his instincts, and his instincts told him she wasn't lying. Vincent studied her for a long time, the firelight casting her shadow against the wall like a ghost walking out of the years he'd tried so hard to forget. She wasn't trembling, nor did she beg. She simply sat there, as though her pain had solidified into stone and frozen within her chest. Who was her brother? Who had framed him? Who within his own ranks had dared forge his orders to conceal something darker? Those questions pounded in his mind, heavy and relentless. And for the first time in many years, Vincent Marcello felt something disturbingly close to concern. Not for the world, but for the woman sitting before him, and for the story she carried, which might just be the final red thread capable of pulling him out of the cold pit he had buried himself in for 2 decades. Claire remained still, the firelight flickering against her pale face. Vincent said nothing, but his gaze seemed to carve through every line, every raindrop still clinging to her hair, as if weighing 2 choices: to believe or not to. In that fragile silence, Claire knew that if she didn't speak, if she didn't lay bare the truth in its rawest form, she would never get another chance. Not for Eric, not for herself. She drew in a deep breath, as though pulling all the pain in her chest up to her lips. "I know I shouldn't have come here," she began, her voice soft as wind through glass, yet each word carried the heavy weight of desperation. "I'm just a housemaid. I know my place. But I've worked in this house long enough to know you're not the kind of man who would order a young mechanic thrown out just because a few tools went missing." They said Eric stole them 3 sets of European kits, each worth thousands of dollars. They blamed him, fired him from the garage, and threatened to call the police if he ever came back. Eric came home with a single bag and eyes that couldn't meet mine. He didn't say a word. He just handed me an envelope inside with a disciplinary report and a termination letter. Claire paused, swallowing hard. My brother is the only one taking care of our mother while I work. She has cancer, the final stage. She doesn't have much time left. Eric works 12 hours a day and never complains. He couldn't. He would never steal anything. Vincent stayed silent. His expression didn't change, but his hand tightened slightly on the armrest. Claire went on, her voice gaining strength, as though speaking the truth was burning through the ice she'd worn for too long. I went to the garage the next day. I wanted to talk to them, to ask for another chance. But no one would see me. The manager, Sam, just looked at me coldly and said the order came from above, that there was nothing to discuss. He told me straight. If I didn't keep my mouth shut, I'd lose my job too. I asked who gave the order. He just smirked and said, "The boss," straight from his mouth. Claire lifted her gaze to Vincent for the first time that night. She didn't look away. I didn't believe him then. I've lived in this house for 5 years. I've never seen you do anything unjust. But when Eric left, when my mother collapsed believing her son was a thief, when I had to take extra shifts to buy her morphine, I started to doubt everything. She stopped, wiping her tears away with the back of her cold hand. She didn't sob. Her tears fell quietly, like the humiliation she'd been forced to swallow for days. My brother's been missing for 2 weeks now. His phone's dead. None of his friends have seen him. I went to the hospitals, the morgues. I walked halfway across the city tonight because I couldn't afford the bus, just to ask one thing. One simple question. Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly. Claire nodded faintly. I need to know. Did you really give the order to fire my brother? The living room fell into silence. The crackling of the fire grew almost unbearable in the stillness. Vincent didn't answer right away. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a few seconds, as if replaying every decision, every conversation in his mind. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough, like stone grinding against steel. I haven't given an order to fire anyone from that garage in 3 months, especially not over 3 toolboxes. Claire froze, her lips pressed together, her eyes wide. Then, Sam lied? Or someone used your name? Vincent didn't reply, but in his gaze, Claire saw something far more powerful than words. He was angry. Not at her, but at whoever had dared to stain his name with a lie. And perhaps, for the first time in many years, Vincent Marcello was about to act, not for power, but for the truth. Vincent rose from his chair, finished his whiskey in one hard swallow, and set the glass down with a sharp thud that made Claire flinch. He moved toward the tall window, pulling the curtains aside. Rain still hammered the stone courtyard, the streetlights reflecting in the glass like eyes watching from the dark. Part of him wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding, that Claire, blinded by grief, had imagined a story that wasn't real. But he knew too well the look of someone who had lost family because of a single wrong decision. And he knew even better that in the world he had built over nearly 4 decades, if one link went crooked, the entire chain could collapse like dominoes. He turned back toward her. She hadn't moved. Her hands were clasped together as if in prayer. The next morning, Boston's sky was still gray, as though sunlight had forgotten the city. Vincent sat in his second-floor study, the room he used to handle matters that could never leave the walls of his house. He didn't make a call. He didn't send an email. He used the old way, the way that left no trace, a message delivered through his most trusted man. Walter Shepard, his right hand since the early days of running the South End gambling halls, arrived 10 minutes later, notebook in hand, his expression uneasy. Vincent wasted no time. 3 weeks ago, did you order the termination of a kid named Eric Mendoza from the garage? Walter flipped through his notes, scanning the blue ink scrawled across the page. No, sir. According to the log, the decision came from management. Specifically, Sam Delaney. He signed off with an internal violation report claiming safety negligence and loss of specialized tools. Vincent braced his hand on the desk, eyes narrowing. Did my signature appear on it? No, sir, Walter said, shaking his head. And I haven't seen or heard any verbal directive from you about it either. Who is this kid to you? The housemaid's brother, Vincent replied. And according to her, he was framed. Worse, Sam claimed the order came from me. Walter froze for a moment, then said nothing. Men who had served Vincent long enough knew. One sentence like that meant the situation had already crossed a line. Vincent ordered all personnel files from the garage to be pulled. Every detail of Eric Mendoza's record was checked: hire date, position, monthly evaluations. Everything was clean. 2 years of good work, not a single infraction. But one detail made Vincent's stomach turn. In the final week before his dismissal, Eric had filed an internal report stating he'd been asked to install an unfamiliar device beneath a vehicle before it was shipped. The report had never been processed. No one remembered ever seeing it. Vincent called Walter back. Who oversaw vehicle inspections during that period? Tommy Rizzo, Walter answered immediately. Sam's wife's nephew. Hired about 3 months ago. Moved up fast. Vincent frowned. He'd never met the man. A hire that hadn't crossed his desk now had control over the final clearance of outbound cars. That was a fatal oversight. He closed his eyes for a few seconds, his mind piecing together the fragments Claire had given him the night before. He ordered all surveillance footage from the garage for the 7 days before Eric's firing. No alerts to Sam. No internal tech team involvement. He had his own cameras installed months ago, backup eyes hidden during a security audit. When the footage came up on the screen, Vincent watched in silence. It was the loading bay warehouse A where outgoing cars were staged. In one grainy, rain-distorted frame, a man in a work jacket was seen crouching beneath a black SUV, slipping something under the chassis. The face was blurred, but the build and movement weren't Eric's. Later in the footage, 3 men entered the control room. One of them, with a low, distinct voice, ordered the deletion of several segments of video. Vincent didn't need to see more. This wasn't a case of an innocent man wrongly accused. This was a cover-up, a conspiracy. And he knew then the first crack in his empire had appeared. Claire had been right. Someone inside was pulling strings. Someone was using his name to hide something far darker. And if he didn't act now, it wouldn't just be his reputation that burned, it would be the entire kingdom he had built with blood. Vincent didn't need long to decide. Early the next morning, he told Walter to prepare the car and headed straight to the garage on the southern edge of Boston where Eric had once worked. The city was still shrouded in mist, the air damp and cold, as if Boston itself were hiding something it didn't want anyone to see. Vincent rarely showed up at lower-level operations, but this time he wanted to see it for himself, to feel it, and if necessary, to tear open whatever rot was festering beneath the polished surface of a business that bore his name. When the car stopped at the gate, Sam Delaney was already waiting. A forced smile stretched thin across his anxious face. He was a man in his mid-40s, balding, soft around the middle, once known for loyalty, but now too comfortable with small power, too convinced of his own importance. Vincent stepped out without shaking hands, without a greeting. His voice was cold enough to freeze the air between them. "Show me the camera footage from the last week of last month." Sam raised his brows, trying to keep composure. "The system overwrote automatically, sir. It only keeps 3 days of recordings. I thought Walter had informed you." Vincent said nothing. He walked past him, his gaze sweeping across every corner of the garage. Every worker hunched silently over their tasks. The atmosphere was suffocating. No one dared meet his eyes. Near the parts storeroom, he spotted a young man cleaning up brown hair, lanky build, eyes avoiding his. Tommy Rizzo. Vincent signaled for Walter to come closer, his voice low. He's the one who planted the device under the car. I recognize his stride. He's no mechanic. He's a link in the chain. Walter nodded, tension tightening his jaw. The two men continued through the office area, the same place where Claire had once come seeking answers for her brother. Vincent stopped at a small desk tucked against the wall. The bottom drawer was locked. He looked at Walter. A single quiet snap, the lock broke. Inside was a clutter of folders, and among them, something that froze Vincent for a heartbeat. A clean copy of Eric's internal report, unsigned, unaltered, with timestamps and submission records intact. The report had never been sent upward. Someone had intercepted it and buried it. Vincent picked up the page, his eyes unmoving. Eric's handwriting was messy but clear. I was instructed to install an unidentified tracking device beneath a Lexus SUV before dispatch. When I refused without higher authorization, the supervisor threatened to fire me. The report was dated the 23rd of the previous month. 2 days later, Eric was dismissed. Vincent folded the paper and stepped out of the office. He stood in the middle of the garage, surrounded by the hum of engines, the scent of oil and metal thick in the air. His gaze found Sam not angry, not even sharp, just a look that made everyone nearby feel a storm was about to break. Who gave the order to fire Eric? Who signed the termination? Vincent's tone was calm, too calm. Sam swallowed hard, stammering. I only followed directions from internal security. I thought it was a directive from above. From Walter. Walter's brow furrowed. I never gave that order. And even if I had, who signed it is what matters. You did. Sam's sweat rolled down his temple. I just thought the kid was stubborn, disruptive. I didn't realize. Vincent cut him off. You don't need to think. You just need to be honest. And you failed at that. He turned to Walter. Bring Tommy to the mansion. I'll talk to him myself. And Sam, you'll keep working here. Until I decide where you disappear to. Sam lowered his head, lips pressed tight, knowing his reprieve was a stay of execution, not mercy. When Vincent left the garage, he said nothing more. But inside him, a quiet fire was spreading. Eric had been set up. And not just him. His name, his organization, everything he'd built was being used for something larger, something darker. And now, Vincent had no choice but to follow that trail to the end. For Claire, for himself, and for the empire he had bled to build. Tommy Rizzo was brought to the mansion before sunset. He didn't resist, but his calm expression was far too composed for a man personally summoned by the boss after a surprise inspection. Walter escorted him into the third-floor study, a room Vincent reserved for conversations that could never have witnesses. The place was sealed like the hull of a ship, windowless, with a single amber light casting over the heavy wooden desk at its center. The air felt thick, not like an office but an interrogation chamber. Vincent was already seated, hands resting on the table, gaze steady and unblinking. Tommy entered, trying to appear composed, but his stiff steps betrayed the tension in his body. Walter locked the door from outside, leaving two men separated by only a few feet and a gulf of power wider than the ocean. Vincent didn't waste words. What were you doing at the garage the night of the 22nd? Tommy swallowed hard, eyes shifting. I was just checking the cars before dispatch. Same as usual. Vincent was silent for 3 seconds, then pressed a button on the small projector hidden in his desk. A blurry image appeared, but clear enough to show a man crouching beneath an SUV, slipping a device onto the metal frame. Do you want to say your name out loud, or should I do it for you? Tommy didn't answer. Vincent stood, circling the desk slowly, each footstep echoing like a countdown clock. I'm not asking because I don't know. I'm asking to see if there's any honesty left in you. You can lie to the men under you, but not to me, Tommy. Finally, Tommy spoke, voice barely above a whisper. I was just following orders. They said it came from management, that it was a tracking device for high-value security shipments. Who's they? Vincent's tone was low, sharp. Tommy hesitated, then said, Sam. Sam told me it was a new protocol, only for special route vehicles. And Eric, he refused to do it, so he was replaced. Vincent's stare cut into him like glass. Do you know what was inside that device? No. I didn't ask. Vincent interrupted. You have no idea what you've stepped into, kid. This isn't a game. This isn't internal business anymore. If that device wasn't mine, then whose was it? Who used my name to put it there? Tommy lowered his head, unable to meet Vincent's eyes. Silence filled the room once more. Vincent leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, thinking. The boy wasn't clever enough to orchestrate a setup like this. He was a pawn, a disposable one. But what mattered was that someone had placed him precisely where they needed him, at exactly the right moment, acting under the illusion of protection from above. That was what Vincent couldn't ignore. Someone within his organization had built an entire playbook complete with personnel, verbal orders, even falsified evidence if needed to remove Eric from the garage. And the reason wasn't missing tools. It was because Eric had refused to comply. He had become an obstacle, and obstacles were eliminated. Vincent signaled Walter to return. He didn't ask Tommy another question. The boy would be watched, every call, every movement, every withdrawal tracked. But Vincent already had what he needed. The picture was forming in his mind, drawn in thick black ink. Eric hadn't just been framed. The entire system had been infiltrated by someone powerful enough to give orders, cunning enough to erase footprints, and reckless enough to borrow Vincent's name. When Tommy was escorted out, Vincent stayed alone in the room. He stared at the frozen frame on the projector, the man crouched beneath the SUV. It wasn't just the image of a subordinate obeying orders. It was proof that someone had built a shadow structure within his own empire. And if he didn't cut it out now, it would spread deeper, stronger, until nothing could be saved. This was no longer about Claire, no longer about pride or reputation. This was survival. And Vincent Marcello, a man who had lived through 3 assassination attempts, understood one thing better than anyone else. The game had begun. And he would strike first. Sam Delaney sat in the garage office, his eyes never leaving the closed iron door, as if waiting for some terrible thing to happen at any moment. He had felt the air change the second Vincent Marcello stepped into the facility yesterday. There were no shouted orders, no slammed fists, no threats. But the boss's gaze alone made Sam understand that the protective shell he had relied on for so long was beginning to crack. Worse still, Tommy Rizzo, his wife's nephew, had been summoned to the mansion and had not returned. A sign that never boded well, and Sam knew it well. He had been in the organization long enough to understand how Vincent dealt with betrayal. Silence, totality, no mercy. The door opened and Walter walked in without knocking. He did not waste greetings or invitations, but went straight to the desk, his look cold as tempered steel. He wanted to talk, right now. Sam tried to keep calm, but his hands tightened beneath the table to keep them from trembling. He rose slowly and followed Walter, each step sounding as if it echoed inside his skull. A car waited outside, and he was taken to the Marcello mansion in silence. No one spoke during the nearly 30-minute ride. When the car stopped, Vincent was already waiting in the library, light from the window falling on the mahogany rug as if inspecting every move Sam made. "Sit down," Vincent ordered without looking at him. Sam sat like a pupil awaiting a failing grade. Vincent pulled from the desk a copy of Eric Mendoza's report, and Sam read the heading at once. Internal complaint form. Beneath it, Eric's messy signature dated the 23rd of last month. Vincent pushed the paper toward him. "Why didn't this reach my office?" Sam glanced at the lines, then looked up. I never saw this." Maybe he filed it in the wrong place or someone mishandled procedure. What procedure allows you to hide a complaint about shady conduct in the garage? I don't know. Honestly, I thought he was upset. Making things up? Tommy even confirmed he was the one who ordered the device be installed in the car. He said it was a directive from above. Sweat broke out on Sam for the first time. His legs no longer felt steady on the cold floor. I never ordered anything wrong. I was following the new transport protocol. I was following security's instructions. Who in security? Name? Vincent pressed. Sam fell silent. Vincent stared. The next question came out soft, but it crushed him inside. Who do you work for besides me? Sam took a deep breath. No one, Vincent cut him off. If you do not tell the truth today, tomorrow you will not have the chance. Sam knew he had reached his limit. He leaned forward, voice hoarse. Someone within the organization, unknown identity, approached me 6 months ago. They said some shipments were being watched and needed protection. They told me to attach tracking devices to the cars to monitor routes. I did not know the real purpose. I did not know who was behind it. They sent instructions through intermediaries. I thought I was doing what was necessary to protect the organization. Vincent did not react outwardly. He only tapped his fingers lightly on the table, each beat like a blade into Sam's mind. You let outsiders plant roots inside my inner circle. You aided internal espionage. You betrayed me for a promise from a faceless man. Sam tried to protest, pleading voice. I did not betray you. I was afraid. They know too much. They know my personal information, my wife, my son. They sent pictures of my house and my child's school. I only wanted to protect my family. Vincent looked at him long. For the first time, his eyes held not anger but a cold disappointment. You do not protect your family by putting this organization at risk. You chose cowardice, and you let an innocent like Eric bear the cost. He rose and walked to the door. Walter, keep him here. Do not let him leave the mansion. And tomorrow, investigate every transaction, every communication, every movement for the past 6 months. I want to know who whispered into his ear. And after that, I want the hand that touched my organization crushed. Vincent did not turn back. He walked away, leaving Sam slumped in the chair, his face drained of color as a man who suddenly understands he has been chosen to be sacrificed in a battle he cannot begin to comprehend. Claire was no longer called the housemaid of the Marcello estate. After that first night when she knocked on the gates in the rain, she never went home. Vincent hadn't asked her to stay, but he hadn't allowed her to leave either. She had a room of her own on the second floor, next to his study. Breakfasts were silent. At dinner, she helped Walter review files, sorting through records from the garage, strange payments, and lists of employees with suspicious connections. Claire didn't complain, didn't ask questions, didn't show fear. She worked as if her life depended on every page she turned. And Vincent quietly observed her. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met. Not trustworthy because of obedience, but because the more cornered she was, the calmer, sharper she became. As if pain itself had forged her into steel. One afternoon, when rare sunlight pierced through Boston's heavy clouds, Vincent called her into the library. He was standing before the old bookcase, a thick envelope in his hand, his eyes not on her, but on the window, where the old maple tree swayed in the wind. "You think you're helping me?" he said, without turning around. "But you have no idea what you're standing in the middle of." Claire stayed silent. "I'm investigating my own men. There's at least one traitor working for an outside power using my name to move illegal shipments, burying the honest in the process. Your brother was one of the casualties. But this isn't just about you anymore. If you choose to stay involved, you need to understand truth has a price, and not everyone survives paying it." Claire took a step forward. "I'm not afraid. My brother is missing. My mother is dying. I have nothing left to lose. Vincent turned, meeting her eyes for the first time since she entered. The look wasn't suspicion, it was a test. He held out the envelope. These are records of unaccounted payments from the garage over the past 3 months. I want you to go to the bank yourself, posing as an internal accountant, and trace the origin of those transactions. I'll have someone escort you, but if you're exposed, no one can help you. How far are you willing to go for the truth? Claire didn't look at the envelope or ask for details. She simply nodded. I'll go. Vincent stepped closer. You understand this could get you followed, threatened. The people behind this aren't the kind you can reason with. I know, Claire said softly, her voice steady. I've been ready since the night I walked through your gate. Vincent said nothing more. He placed the envelope in her hand. Tomorrow morning, a car will take you. Walter will go with you. And Claire, if anything happens, you tell me before it kills you. Claire gripped the envelope tightly, nodded once more, and left the library. When the door closed, Vincent remained still for a long time. He wasn't used to this feeling, part worry, part expectation. The small, fragile woman who had once swept his floors was now stepping into a darkness even he hadn't yet mapped. But if anyone had the will to face it without flinching, it was her. That night, Claire sat alone in her room, unfolding the documents inside the envelope. Her heart beat faster than it had since Eric disappeared. Every number, every hidden account, every strange transfer felt like a piece of a puzzle waiting to reveal a larger truth. And for the first time in weeks, she wasn't just a desperate sister. She was part of an investigation, part of a reckoning. And though she didn't know how far it would take her, Claire understood one thing clearly: if she wanted to pull Eric out of the shadows, there was no turning back. The black car carrying Claire left the Marcello estate just before 8 that morning. A pale mist still clung to the streets, but inside her, everything had never felt clearer. Beside her sat Walter, his face as composed and unreadable as ever, a folder of encrypted documents resting on his lap, the copies of the suspicious transactions Vincent had handed her the night before. Their destination was a quiet business district in northern Boston, where most of the Marcello Group's garage accounts were managed and processed. Claire said nothing during the drive. She reread every line of the report, memorizing account names, dates, and amounts, transferred under vague labels like special shipping fees or emergency security costs. But what chilled her most was the pattern: regular transfers, small enough to avoid attention, yet together worth a fortune. When they arrived, Claire slipped on the light gray blazer Walter had brought, tied her hair neatly, and put on a pair of glasses. She looked every bit the part of an internal auditor. Walter stayed behind with the car. Claire entered the bank calmly but with quiet authority, walked straight to the information counter, and requested to meet the company's financial supervisor. She introduced herself as a temporary assistant from Marcello Group, conducting an urgent expense review. With her poised manner and a convincing letter of authorization complete with Vincent's forged signature prepared by Walter, no one doubted her. 15 minutes later, she was seated in a small conference room with a mid-level employee named Alan, who handled corporate transactions for medium-sized accounts. He opened his computer, logged in, and gave her a courteous glance. "Where would you like to begin?" Claire handed him a list of 10 specific transaction codes, payments routed through multiple intermediaries, but all ending at the same sequence of receiving accounts. Alan nodded and began tracing them. When the results appeared, Claire's pulse quickened. Every transfer led to a company called Redstone Logistics, registered in Chicago but with no physical office. On paper, it dealt in luxury automotive components. But a quick internal search showed no real invoices in the past 3 months, though money flowed into its account every week. Claire leaned forward, requesting more. She wanted the legal representative's name and all subsidiary accounts linked to Redstone. Alan hesitated but finally complied. The current representative is a man named Paul Mercer. The moment she heard the name, Claire's stomach clenched. Paul Mercer. It was a name she had seen once before buried in the old paperwork she'd pulled from Sam Delaney's office. One of the forgotten transaction slips had included a note. Urgent shipment for Mercer SUV line. The same SUV Eric had refused to tamper with. The pieces started to fit. Redstone Logistics was a front. Mercer was the handler. And whatever had been attached beneath that car, it wasn't just a tracking device. It was something far more dangerous. Claire requested printed records of all transactions tied to Redstone Logistics over the last 3 months. She thanked Alan and left quickly. The moment she stepped outside, Walter opened the car door for her. She climbed in, clutching the stack of papers tightly. He noticed the look on her face. "Something wrong?" he asked. Claire lifted her eyes, her voice low but steady. "Someone's using the company's name to launder money or move something illegal. And Eric, he might have found out. That's why they got rid of him." Walter nodded silently, steering the car back toward the estate. Both of them understood now the cold numbers on those pages had begun to tell a story. And the man behind them, the one hiding behind the name Mercer, wasn't just a link in the chain. He was the center of a web spreading deep into the system. Claire looked out the window, her reflection sharp against the glass. Her eyes no longer carried grief alone, they held clarity. The clarity of someone who finally understood what she was up against. And there was no stopping now. Not when the truth had begun to surface, piece by piece, like this. The car had barely turned through the Marcello gates when Walter's phone buzzed an incoming encrypted call from an internal number. He answered without a word, listening for only a few seconds before his expression darkened. "Something's happened." Claire looked at him, startled, but before she could ask, he handed her the phone. A single image filled the screen. No message, no caption. A dimly lit room, a lone bulb casting a sickly yellow light over the swollen, bruised face of a young man. His hands were bound behind his back. His mouth was sealed with black tape. Claire froze. It was Eric. He was alive. But his eyes were wide with terror, wild and hollow, as if death itself stood just beyond the frame. Her heart clenched so hard she could barely breathe. For weeks, she had trained herself to stay composed, but in that moment, everything inside her trembled. Still, as Walter pulled the car to a stop and opened her door, she tightened her grip on the printed bank records and took a deep breath. Not now. She couldn't break now. If Eric was still alive, she had to hold on. Vincent was waiting in the library, standing by the tall window, a glass of whiskey in hand that he hadn't touched. He turned when Walter and Claire entered, his gaze sweeping over her pale face before settling on the folder in her grasp. But Claire didn't hand it over. Instead, she held out the phone. The photo glowed on the screen. No explanation was needed. Vincent understood at once. He stayed silent for a long time before speaking, his voice low and dangerous, like the rumble before a storm. "Where was it sent from?" Walter answered crisply. "Unknown number, temporary encryption. The IP bounced across at least 4 countries. Not amateurs." Claire's voice broke slightly. "They know we're investigating. And they know I'm involved. They're using Eric to make me stop. But I can't. I won't." She stepped forward and placed the folder on Vincent's desk. "This is the evidence. Redstone Logistics is a laundering front. Paul Mercer is connected to every transfer routed through the garage. It all leads back to him. And Eric, he must have found out." Vincent opened the folder, scanning the figures, the bank codes, the stamped copies bearing Mercer's name. Each page was a blade confirming just how deeply his empire had been compromised. And now, as Claire drew close to the truth, the response was clear: her brother taken. Not to be killed, but to silence her. He lifted his gaze, his voice glacial. "Claire, I'll ask one more time. How far are you willing to go?" She didn't hesitate. "As far as it takes." If they think taking Eric will stop me, they're wrong. I don't need to survive. I just need him to come home. Walter broke the tension, his tone taut as wire. We can trace the image's origin, but it'll take time, at least 12 hours to decrypt the routing. Vincent nodded, walking to the bookshelf and pulling out a small device the size of a hard drive. He tossed it to Walter. That's access to the secondary camera network I installed at the old garage 6 months ago. No one else knows about it. Start there. Check every connected warehouse tied to Redstone quietly. Don't alert anyone. Eric's still in the city. If they meant to kill him, they already would have. Sending this photo was a warning, not an execution. Claire's fists clenched. In her mind, she saw Eric alone in that dark room, terrified, waiting for the moment they would drag him away for good. She wouldn't let that happen. If she had to become bait, if she had to walk straight into the snake's nest, she would. Eric was the only reason she hadn't already surrendered to despair. Vincent studied her, and for the first time, he no longer saw the quiet housemaid who once scrubbed his floors in silence. He saw a woman stepping into war, heart blazing not for power, but for blood. And people like her, people who fought for love, either burned alive or set the whole world on fire to bring it back. Claire's phone buzzed just before midnight. She was alone in the Marcello library. The soft amber light from the desk lamp spilling across pages filled with numbers she had already memorized. Walter and Vincent had left less than 20 minutes ago for a late meeting with the security division. When she picked up the phone, her pulse quickened. The message came from an unregistered number, just a string of meaningless digits. She opened it. One line. No greeting. No explanation. Bring the contract copies to the South Pier before 2 a.m. Come alone. If you want your brother alive. That was all. No threats, no signature, but the words hit like a fist to the chest. Claire called back immediately. The number was already dead. She ran into the hallway, dark, silent, empty. She knew what Vincent would do if he found out. Stop her, or worse, go in her place. But if those men sensed they were being watched, Eric wouldn't live to see the morning. She hurried back to her room, yanked open a drawer, and pulled out the folder from the bank. With shaking hands, she chose only the pages bearing Mercer's signature and Redstone Logistics' seal, not the full set. Just enough to make them think she carried the real evidence. She slipped them into a leather case, then quietly slipped out through the kitchen exit, the one blind spot in the mansion's camera grid. The night air was razor sharp, the wind slashing against her skin. She flagged down an old taxi at the corner, giving the driver the South Pier address in a calm voice that startled even her. He didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and drove into the darkness. By the time they reached the docks, it was 1:45 a.m. The cargo yard was nearly deserted, rows of containers stacked like silent walls, the faint orange glow of sodium lights reflecting off the wet ground. Claire stepped out, gripping the folder tight, scanning the shadows. About 50 meters away, a truck idled quietly, its engine humming. Then a voice rose from the darkness behind a container. Closer. Alone. She turned, seeing nothing, but obeyed. The air felt thick, heavy, as if even the night itself were watching her. As she neared the truck, a tall man emerged from the shadows. He wore a long coat, hat pulled low over his face. He raised a hand. The files. Claire held out the folder but didn't release it. Not until I see my brother. He gave a short, humorless laugh. You think you're in a position to bargain? Then he motioned with his hand. From behind another container, 2 men appeared, dragging Eric between them. His hands were bound, mouth sealed with black tape. He stumbled, but he was alive. His eyes went wide when he saw her. Claire's throat closed. She nodded, stepped forward twice, and dropped the folder at her feet. The man stooped, rifled through the papers, the faint light glinting off his eyes. A slow smile spread across his face. He turned to his men. Let him go. Don't touch the girl. Then, without another word, he vanished into the darkness beyond the containers. They shoved Eric toward her. Claire rushed forward, tearing the tape from his mouth, cutting the ropes with the small knife she kept in her coat. He couldn't speak. He just clung to her, trembling. She held his hand, helping him up, ready to leave this God-forsaken place. But then a voice behind them. You really think I'd let you walk away that easily? Claire spun around. A different man stepped out of the shadows, not part of the first group. A gun raised aimed straight at Eric. Before he could pull the trigger, another shot cracked through the air. He fell, dead, before he hit the ground. Footsteps pounded toward them. Walter appeared, flanked by two of Vincent's guards, weapons drawn. Claire clutched Eric to her chest, tears spilling freely now. Walter's tone was half reproach, half relief. You really thought you came alone, didn't you? He knew the moment you stepped out of the kitchen. He sent me after you from the start. Claire turned, looking back toward the darkness where the first man had disappeared. Nothing. No trace. Only the echo of the truck's fading engine and the distant moan of the sea. But she understood now. The game had changed. And whoever was pulling the strings from the shadows, whoever had dared to touch her brother, wouldn't stop simply because she'd gotten him back. When Claire and Eric returned to the Marcello estate, dawn was already breaking. Vincent was waiting in the library, a cup of coffee cooling untouched in his hand. The moment he saw Eric's thin figure cross the doorway, his face bruised, wrists still marked from the ropes, eyes wide with exhaustion and fear, Vincent knew he'd been right to have Walter shadow Claire. She was reckless, yes, but not foolish. She had brought decoy files, hidden the real evidence elsewhere, and risked her life to bring her brother back. Yet as he watched her, he realized something else. The time for defense was over. It was time to strike. When Walter led Eric away to rest, Claire turned back toward Vincent. I can't wait any longer. They won't stop. They think I'm someone they can control. It's time we prove them wrong. Vincent gave a slow nod. Good. I was about to say the same thing, but we can't move on emotion. We plan. We bait. And above all, we make them believe they still hold the upper hand. The plan began with a single USB drive. Claire had compiled copies of every document she'd retrieved: the bank records, the Redstone logistics files, Mercer's transaction trail, the internal garage audits. Vincent told her to forge a second set, nearly identical, but with one deliberate flaw in the dates subtle enough that only those directly involved would notice. The perfect lure. He had Walter send a message from an anonymous source to Paul Mercer. Short, cold. We have copies of Ms. Claire's documents. We know about the garage, Redstone, and Shipment 13. If you want them back, send someone to negotiate. The message was dispatched from an untraceable location. Meanwhile, Claire played the part of a frightened insider losing control. She quietly leaked word to a small local journalist that evidence of money laundering might have escaped from within the Marcello network. The rumor spread slowly but steadily, just enough to make those in the shadows panic. 2 days later, the reply came. Not a threat this time, but an offer. A meeting. Time, place, and one strange condition. Claire had to come alone, bringing the original data. Walter wanted to refuse, but Claire met Vincent's gaze. This is the only way we find out who's really pulling the strings. Vincent agreed, but on one condition. He would go too. No distant surveillance, no hidden guards. He would appear as her guarantor. A direct exchange to draw the snake out of its hole. They chose an abandoned riverside warehouse, once a freight depot in the 80s, no cameras, no power, only echoes of footsteps across the concrete floor. Claire entered first, a briefcase in hand containing the forged files. From the opposite side, 3 men appeared. The one in the center was Mercer. He hadn't bothered to hide. He wanted her to see him, to know this wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. He stepped forward, his gaze cold and sharp. "You're brave, but you don't understand who you're dealing with." Claire met his stare, steady and unblinking. "And you underestimated me from the start." She tossed the briefcase toward him. Mercer crouched, flipped it open, scanned a few pages, and froze. That was the moment Vincent stepped out of the shadows at the edge of the warehouse. Mercer's head snapped up. Vincent's voice cut through the air low and sharp as a blade. "You should never have touched what's mine, and you should never have believed I didn't know who was stabbing me in the back." Mercer took a step backward, but behind him, the metal door slammed shut. Walter and 4 guards emerged from the side entrances, weapons drawn. The trap had closed. Claire moved closer, her voice steady and fierce. "This is what you were afraid of all along, isn't it? Not the files, the truth. And now it's everywhere, not just with me. If I disappear, 10 others will release everything." Mercer said nothing. He didn't need to. The realization in his eyes was enough. He'd lost. Vincent didn't threaten. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "You have 2 choices. Tell me who you're working for or disappear from the city forever. And remember, I don't give second chances." When they stepped out of the warehouse, rain had begun to fall slow, steady, washing the dust from the air. Claire tilted her face toward the gray sky, for the first time feeling something like release. She knew the war wasn't over, but from this day forward she was no longer running. She was leading. Nearly a week had passed since Mercer had been subdued in the abandoned warehouse, yet the atmosphere at the Marcello estate remained taut as a drawn string. Vincent knew Mercer was not the mastermind, merely a coordinator, a clever pawn who knew when to strike. But who stood behind him? Who possessed enough power to manipulate a complex financial network, infiltrate the garage system, bypass senior management, and even dare to target his own family? The answer didn't come from Mercer's words. He refused to name anyone, leaving only a single line before being released under Vincent's orders. Any further probing meant choosing between the lives of his loved ones and the survival of the empire he had built. That thought haunted Vincent through the night, yet he didn't falter. Together with Claire, he decided to strike next. At the origin point of every Redstone Logistics shipment, the very place Eric had referenced in his internal report, the South Pier, Dock 13, on the west side of the city. They couldn't storm in recklessly. A legitimate pretext was required to approach without alerting anyone. Claire proposed a fake meeting, an internal Marcello representative meeting with a potential investment partner. They prepared the files, business cards, invitations, all flawless. On a Friday afternoon, as international shipments prepared to depart, Claire, accompanied by 2 of Walter's team, entered the warehouse area at Dock 13. No one expected the former housemaid to orchestrate a deep infiltration into the heart of an illicit operation. Everything went smoothly until they approached a dark green container, absent from the official shipping list. A guard stepped forward to block them. Claire nodded subtly, then turned her back. The moment she moved out of his sight, she signaled Walter with the small tracker hidden in her ring. 10 minutes later, the encrypted signal reached the mansion. Vincent was waiting. He summoned a name long unknown in the organization, Sam Delaney. Sam was brought back from secret detention after several days of silence. When questioned one last time, he still insisted he didn't know who was behind Mercer. But when Vincent mentioned a small detail only someone involved would know, the first Redstone shipment had been stored in the dark green container at Dock 13, Sam's eyes changed. He lowered his head. "I don't know his real name. I only know they call him Dagger. No one has seen his face. Everything goes through intermediaries. I was ordered to stay silent and follow instructions. In exchange, my son was kept safe." Vincent said nothing further. He ordered a full investigation of all communications in and out of Sam over the past 6 months, while establishing a covert surveillance team at Dock 13. That night, Claire returned to the pier with Walter. No disguise, no pretense. They broke into the warehouse. Opening the green container, they found not goods, but tracking devices, electronic circuit boards, and equipment for installing spyware on the transportation system. Irrefutable evidence. Just as Claire reached for her phone to photograph the evidence, a sound came from behind. Multiple shadows emerged, cutting off the exit. Walter shoved Claire into cover, gun drawn. One of the intruders stepped forward, voice loud and threatening. "Don't think bringing your brother back ends this. You're dragging your whole family into death." Claire didn't flinch. "If I die, 10 others will release the truth. You cannot silence the world." A shot rang out, grazing Claire's shoulder. Walter returned fire. Alarms blared, chaos erupted, but reinforcements arrived just in time. Through the haze of smoke, Claire was pulled to safety. Yet she understood the truth never came without a price. Blood had been spilled. From this moment on, everyone would face the consequences. She looked back at the foggy pier, her eyes free of fear. For the cost of truth she was ready to pay, and Dagger, whoever he was, would learn that sooner or later. The wail of sirens echoed across the docks as backup forces poured in. Walter shoved Claire into an empty truck to take cover. Blood from the graze on her shoulder had soaked through her thin blouse, but she didn't feel pain. Her mind focused on one thing: Eric. He had been brought back. He was safe, but a suffocating unease gripped her nonetheless. Amid the shouting over radios and the distant gunfire, Claire sensed the situation was spiraling beyond control. This was no longer a mere evidence-gathering operation. It had become a full-blown battle between two shadowed powers, and Eric, whether he wanted to or not, was caught in the eye of the storm. Walter hastily ordered the strike team to pull back strategically after confirming the container with the espionage equipment and securing it. But when communications with Outpost 3, the temporary safe location for Eric, were abruptly cut, Vincent immediately understood the plan had been compromised. Dagger had reacted faster than anyone anticipated, and his objective had never been merely to hide a crime. It was to annihilate anyone who might expose him, especially Claire and Eric. A masked group breached the rear of the old warehouse near the pier, where Eric had been held awaiting transfer to a safe location. As Walter, Claire, and an armed team approached, a volley of gunfire erupted from inside. Claire nearly lost control, lunging forward despite warnings, but Walter held her back and signaled the team to cover 3 sides. When the main door was blown open, they stormed in amid smoke, gunfire, and screams. Claire froze when she saw Eric bound to an iron post, gagged, eyes wide with terror as one attacker pressed a gun to his head, using him as a human shield. Time seemed to stop. Vincent appeared behind them, calm in the chaos. He signaled to a sniper to take position across from the scene. He knew one thing clearly. Right now, every emotion was a weakness. In those fleeting seconds, he had to make a choice. Claire could wait no longer. She sprang from cover, her voice choked with tears. "Don't shoot, please, I'll go with you, let him go." "Sir." The assailant growled, taking another step forward. Eric was on the brink of death. Then a flash of light bullet from the sniper struck the kidnapper's shoulder. He collapsed, and in that instant, Eric was freed. The team surged in, subduing the remaining attackers. Claire rushed to Eric, removing the tape from his mouth and cutting the ropes herself. He couldn't speak, collapsing against her like a frightened child, his body shaking uncontrollably. She held him close, ignoring the blood on her sleeves, and tears streamed freely. Not from fear, but from relief. Eric was alive. After all the days spent in darkness, she could finally touch him, hold him, feel the warmth of his breath, the beating of his heart. Vincent stepped forward, his gaze heavy as he watched the 2 siblings. He said nothing, simply resting a hand lightly on Claire's shoulder. She looked up, tear-blurred eyes burning with resolve. "I will not forgive whoever did this." Vincent nodded. She would not have to do it alone. Eric was brought back to the mansion in psychological shock but physically unharmed. Claire stayed by his side through the night, holding his hand as if letting go would mean losing him again. Vincent called an emergency meeting. No one could doubt the existence of Dagger and the organization behind him. From this moment on, it was no longer about investigation. It was about confrontation. And Claire, once a lone sister seeking justice, had now become the center of a war in which the stakes were more than truth, they were life itself. Nearly 1 week after Mercer had been subdued in the old warehouse, the air at the Marcello estate remained taut as a drawn wire. Vincent knew Mercer was not the mastermind, but merely a coordinator, a clever puppet who chose the moment to move, yet who stood behind him, who had the power to manipulate a complex financial network, to worm into the garage system, to bypass senior managers, and even to strike at his family. That question did not come from Mercer's mouth. Mercer refused to name anyone and left only a single line before being released under Vincent's orders, a line that haunted Vincent through the night. Press further, and you will have to choose between the lives of your loved ones and the survival of the empire you built. And Vincent did not retreat. He and Claire decided on the next strike, to attack the origin point of Redstone Logistics shipments, the very place Eric had mentioned in his internal report, Dock 13 on the city's west side. They could not act recklessly. They needed a plausible reason to approach, without alerting anyone. Claire proposed a fake meeting, an internal Marcello representative supposedly meeting with a potential investor. They prepared files, business cards, invitations, everything flawless, and on a Friday afternoon as international cargo ready to depart. Claire, with 2 members of Walter's team, entered the warehouse area at Dock 13. No one expected the former housemaid to be orchestrating a deep insertion into the heart of an illicit operation. Everything proceeded smoothly until they neared a dark green container not on the legal shipping list. A guard stepped forward to block them, and Claire merely nodded and turned away as if unremarkable. But as soon as she left his sight, she signaled Walter with a tiny tracker hidden in her ring. 10 minutes later, the encrypted signal reached the mansion, and Vincent summoned a name long kept secret in the organization: Sam Delaney. Sam was brought back from secret detention after days of silence, and though he again insisted he did not know who was behind Mercer, when Vincent offered a detail only an insider would know, that the first Redstone shipment had been stored in the dark green container at Dock 13. Sam's face changed, and he bowed his head and admitted, "I do not know his real name. They call him Dagger. No one sees his face. Everything is through intermediaries. I was told to stay silent, to follow orders, and in return, my son was kept safe." Vincent said nothing further but ordered a full investigation of Sam's communications over the past 6 months and set up a covert surveillance team at Dock 13. That night, Claire returned to the pier with Walter with no disguise and no pretense, and they broke into the warehouse. Inside the green container, they found not goods, but tracking devices, circuit boards, and equipment used to install spyware in the transport system. Irrefutable evidence, and just as Claire reached for her phone to capture images, a sound came from behind and multiple shadows closed off their exit. Walter shoved Claire into cover and drew his gun, while one intruder stepped forward and snarled that bringing her brother back did not end it, and that she was dragging her family to death. Claire did not flinch, and answered that if she died, 10 others would publish the truth. "You cannot silence the world." A shot grazed her shoulder, and Walter returned fire. Alarms blared and chaos erupted, yet reinforcements arrived in time. Through the smoky haze, Claire was pulled to safety, but she understood then that truth never arrives without a price. Blood had been spilled, and from that moment on, everyone would have to face the consequences. She looked back at the misty pier with eyes stripped of fear, ready to pay the cost of truth. And the man called Dagger, whoever he was, would learn soon enough. Vincent sat motionless in the library, the dim light from the desk lamp casting shadows that deepened the lines in his face, as if time itself had been pressed into those wrinkles overnight. The name Sam had just revealed was one Vincent had never imagined could betray him: Marcus Fielding, regional director of the Eastern Division, a man who had bled and risked everything alongside him in the early days of expanding the garage system, the same man who had once held Vincent's daughter at her baptism, the man Vincent had said he would leave the entire corporation to if he died. And yet, he was Dagger, not a random nickname, but a real blade, hidden behind a mask of loyalty, stabbing Vincent in the back for years without his knowledge. But Vincent did not rage, did not smash anything. He simply rose quietly, summoned Claire, and signaled Walter to close the door. He spoke, low and deliberate. "It's time we play by their rules, but on my board." Claire listened intently. Her eyes were no longer those of a servant in the mansion. They were the eyes of a true ally. In less than an hour, Vincent outlined the plan. First, he convened an emergency meeting of all regional managers, under the pretext of announcing organizational changes after the pier incident. Marcus, naturally, would attend. That would be the moment the board turned. Vincent instructed Claire to take a central role in the presentation. He wanted everyone to see she was no longer a sacrificial pawn, but the keeper of the truth. Meanwhile, Walter and the security team would establish hidden cameras and emergency signal jammers to prevent Marcus from escaping. Every move was calculated down to the second, down to each position. On the day of the meeting, the large second-floor room was arranged carefully, lighting adjusted to conceal camera positions. Marcus arrived on time, still in his tailored suit, offering friendly smiles and shaking hands as if he were the elder of a family. When it was Claire's turn, he lingered a moment longer, eyes narrowing. "It's been a while. I hear you've accomplished impressive things." Claire merely nodded lightly, but her hands were clenched tightly around the folders she had hidden beneath the public documents. The meeting began with situational updates. Vincent stood and declared before everyone that the system had been compromised from within, and no traitor would be allowed to remain in the organization. Claire stepped to the podium, turned on the projector, and began presenting the flow of funds, shipping routes, and Redstone Logistics' chain of commands. Every eye in the room followed her. At the end, she played a video clip of Sam's confession, in which he mentioned Dagger and named Marcus directly. Silence fell over the room. Marcus smiled thinly and stood. Ridiculous. A confession from a traitor now used to slander me? Vincent remained seated, eyes cold as steel. "No one slanders you, Marcus. We're only showing what you exposed yourself." As soon as he finished speaking, Walter entered with two men in civilian clothes. One of them held up a phone, projecting a recording of a call between Marcus and an intermediary, in which Marcus confirmed he had ordered shipments through Redstone and instructed that Eric be removed if necessary. Marcus's face went pale. He stepped back, looking for an escape, but the doors were locked from the outside. The crowd rose, looks of scorn and anger falling upon him. Vincent stepped forward, staring him down. "I once considered you family, but you have killed the last bit of trust I had left." Marcus was escorted from the room. Claire remained standing, feeling no triumph, only the relief of a weight lifted that had pressed upon her for years. Vincent turned to her. The board had shifted. But this game was not over. The next opponent would not reveal themselves as easily as Marcus. Yet this time, they would have to fear. Because for the first time, Vincent Marcello was fighting not just for his reputation, but for justice, and for the girl who once stood in the rain, knocking at his door with only a single sentence. When Marcus was escorted out of the boardroom, the Marcello system pitched and swayed as if a hidden keel had been struck. Though he was not the supreme power, Marcus had been a crucial hinge in the web of internal manipulation, and with his fall, the others began to panic. Vincent did not need to order an immediate purge because the event itself sounded like a gunshot across the organization, a mute signal that the game had turned a page, and anyone not stepping into the light would soon be swallowed by darkness forever. Yet he had not foreseen how far the echo would travel. For only 2 days after the video of Sam's confession and the evidence implicating Marcus reached a journalist close to Claire, a federal inquiry had been opened, and the FBI formally stepped in. On a Monday morning, when Vincent had just crossed the mansion lawn, black cars were already waiting. Special Agent Thomas Layton, a veteran who had run major financial crime cases, met Vincent in the drawing room with no cuffs in hand and only a thick dossier to place on the table. He did not ask many questions, speaking in a calm voice. "We have been tracking Redstone Logistics for some time, but only when the files from Ms. Claire appeared did we have cause to act. You have two choices, Mr. said. Vincent, full cooperation or becoming a target of investigation. Vincent did not blink. He knew this game, and the moment to step into a new role he chose cooperation with one condition. Protect her. Protect Eric. Thomas nodded. "We have witness protection plans, but remember, from now on you can no longer choose whom to shield." The following days were like a delicate operation. The FBI executed surprise searches across garage branches, pulled financial records, summoned management for questioning. Some people vanished before summons arrived. Others flipped and revealed payment lines through shell companies, exposing a money laundering network that reached into other states. The name Dagger appeared again and again, but no one truly knew whether it was a single man or a code name masking an entire dark enterprise. Still, the FBI amassed enough to issue arrest warrants for Marcus and several members of Marcello's financial council. The empire that once ran like a well-oiled machine now faced a purge of unprecedented scale. Claire watched it all in silence. She did not celebrate arrests. She felt no vindication at the unmasking of a rotten network. Only exhaustion and worry for Eric, who remained in witness protection, yet startled awake from nightmares, mouthing fragmented words in the dark. She felt pity rather than blame, and she understood that even with the FBI's involvement and the organization's cleansing, Eric's real battle would continue in the private chambers of his mind for a long time to come. Vincent gradually withdrew from day-to-day operations, handing most duties to a newly vetted management team after personally vetting each candidate. He kept only one role, patron of the cleanup process, and he asked more of Claire than merely a source of evidence. She began attending FBI meetings, delivering data, suggesting investigative leads, even helping to match transactional points that only she and Eric had observed while working in the garage. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Thomas Layton returned to the mansion to speak plainly. What he and Claire had uncovered not only dismantled a money laundering ring, but opened doors to investigating other networks. Yet he warned, there would be those who would not quietly watch everything fall apart. Vincent answered, calmly watching rain wait the garden. "I was ready the night she first knocked on my gate. And today I still stand with her no matter the cost. The game is no longer lived in shadow, and from now on no one will have to cry alone under the iron gates." Claire stood by the second-floor window of the Marcello mansion, the morning sunlight filtering through the thin curtains and casting a soft golden glow across her face like a fragile dream. Below, Walter directed a team of new staff reorganizing the main garage, once a hub for laundering vast sums of illicit money, now completely restructured under the oversight of the FBI. The clamor of machinery was gone, the endless flow of shadowy traffic halted, and the space operated according to procedure, gradually restoring the trust it had long lost. Claire took a deep breath, set her coffee cup down, and walked along the long corridor toward the conference room. Today was her first time leading a strategic meeting as Vincent's officially appointed Director of Internal Restructuring. No one in the room could forget the woman before them, a former housemaid, who once silently scrubbed floors and carried trays unnoticed. But now, every step Claire took drew attention. Not because of her title, but because of the story she carried. A story of courage, of truths buried and unearthed, of a journey no one would have believed possible, of a woman who had once stood shivering in the rain and knocked on the door of a mafia boss with a single sentence that had changed his life. Vincent sat at the head of the table, silent, observing. He didn't need to intervene. He knew the woman before them had already surpassed the role of mere aide. She was the epicenter of change, and the seasoned managers around the table recognized it without a word. Claire began, calm yet resolute. We cannot erase the past, but we can control how the future is written. I am not here to issue orders. I am here to ensure that anyone still in this room understands that honesty is the only thing keeping this organization alive. With that, she launched into the restructuring plan. Garages would be audited independently by region. Cash flow would be specially monitored. All previous murky relationships with Redstone Logistics would be terminated, and a new personnel team would be installed, including those who had been victims under the old system, as a way to restore fairness from within. No one objected. None could deny that Claire had saved this organization from complete collapse. She had no advanced degrees, no elite management training, but she possessed what no one else in that room had: lived experience. She had once been overlooked, threatened, stripped of everything, yet she had risen, not merely to survive, but to fight so others could live rightly. When the meeting concluded, Vincent was the last to leave. He paused at the door, looking at Claire, a genuine smile breaking across his face, no longer a gaze of challenge or observation, but of true acknowledgement. I thought I had seen every kind of person, he said, but you've shown me that true loyalty sometimes comes from the most unexpected place. Claire inclined her head slightly, her eyes free of the timidity she once carried. She was no longer the woman who had sought shelter under the iron gates on a rainy night. She was Claire Alvarez, the new operator of the Marcello system, and the reason the Empire could stand firm without bowing to darkness. That evening, in the small room that had once served as her temporary quarters when she was still a maid, Claire sat at the desk, writing in her mother's old journal not about work, but about her feelings. She wrote that justice does not always come from the courts, and trust is not always built with power. Sometimes everything begins with a single honest word on a cold, rainy night, in front of a gate that seems it will never open. And the miracle is, when you dare to step forward, it truly will open. Claire stood by the second-floor window of the Marcello mansion one October morning, sunlight streaming through the golden-tinged maple leaves lining the driveway, bathing her face in a soft, dreamlike glow. The air was lighter now, rare calm after months of chaos. She had woken earlier than usual, not for work, but for something small, yet precious: laughter. From the living room below came the sound of Eric playing chess with Vincent beneath the warm glow of the lamps. No longer the trembling boy who once hid from the world, Eric was beginning to breathe normally again. His laughter was real, unforced, and it made Claire's heart feel as if it might melt. She lingered in the hallway for a moment, letting that sound wash over her, a melody that soothed all the suffering she had endured. Since the FBI's involvement and Marcus's arrest, threats to Claire's family had lessened considerably. But Vincent remained vigilant. He had arranged for Eric to live within a special protected zone of the mansion, with its own security system and constant oversight. Walter provided gentle training, not to turn Eric into an operative of the organization, but to ensure he could protect himself physically and mentally. Eric had changed. He was no longer the shy technician who only focused on control panels. He began learning the operations of the organization not out of ambition, but to be useful, to safeguard his sister, who had risked her life to rescue him from the claws of merciless adversaries. Claire did not restrain him, but she maintained boundaries. She did not want him drawn too deeply into the inner workings. For her, the most important thing now was peace, and she knew Vincent understood that. After everything, he no longer regarded her merely as a successor. He truly considered her family. He no longer called her Ms. Alvarez in meetings, simply Claire. Every morning he asked the same question: "Is Eric all right?" And every time she responded with a small, reassuring nod, enough to put him at ease, enough to remind herself that everything she did was for one thing: Eric's safety and peace of mind. One chilly day, clouds heavy with the promise of rain, Vincent called Claire to the back garden. He stood by the weathered stone bench where he had often smoked cigars, an envelope in hand. When Claire approached, he did not speak immediately, only gazed at the gray sky and smiled softly. "I thought I would die with this system," he said, "but you have shown me it can change, that it can endure differently, not through blood, but through respect." He handed her the envelope. Inside were the papers for a small suburban house and the rights to a portion of the organization's fixed assets. Claire opened it, stunned. Vincent continued, "This is for you and Eric. A place you can truly call home, not a hideout. You've long since repaid your debt, Claire. Now it's my turn to do what should have been done a long time ago." Claire said nothing at first, tears slipping down her hands before she realized. She clutched the envelope, looked at Vincent, and whispered a single sentence, simple yet brimming with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me when I had nothing to prove." Vincent nodded, requiring no further words. That evening, as Claire and Eric sat in the kitchen drinking hot chocolate, a ritual whenever it rained, Eric gazed at his sister with eyes full of gratitude. He had never dared to imagine a day like this. Claire smiled, resting her hand on the table, her voice warm. "We have walked through the longest night, Eric. From now on, everything will be different. A new chapter begins, not with vengeance, but with love and protection for each other." And at dawn the next morning, when sunlight filtered through the maple trees, Claire knew one thing for certain: her family could finally breathe. No longer hiding, no longer living in fear. They had weathered the storm, and now it was time to truly live. Claire stood silently at the old iron gates of the Marcello mansion on a late afternoon, as the sun touched the horizon and bathed the entire entrance in a soft golden glow. The rain had long ceased, yet the memory of that stormy night remained vivid in her mind, as if it had happened only yesterday. Here she had once stood shivering in the freezing downpour, carrying her grief and speaking a single sentence to claim a glimmer of hope. She could never have imagined that those seemingly closed gates would mark the beginning of a journey that would not only change her life, but also reshape the fate of an empire and bring light to the forgotten souls dwelling in darkness. Behind her, Vincent stepped slowly into the open, his silver hair catching the sunset's glow. He looked at Claire with eyes no longer filled with the doubt of that first day, but with quiet acknowledgement. He stood beside her, and for several minutes, neither spoke a word. Then he smiled faintly, his voice low and warm. "Perhaps it is not you who needed me, but I who needed you. Perhaps we saved each other." Claire turned to him, tears quietly spilling down, not from sorrow, but from a sudden, profound relief. No words were needed. All was understood in the silence they shared. Claire's story was more than a journey from suffering to justice, from an unnoticed housemaid to a leader with influence. It was proof that when a single person dares to speak the truth, an entire world can change. And sometimes, kindness, perseverance, and faith in what is right become the strongest weapons in a world rife with scheming and shadow. From Claire, we learn that no one is too small to make a difference, and no one is undeserving of a second chance. Family is not always bound by blood, but by those who remain by our side when all other doors have closed. And justice sometimes begins with compassion. If this story has touched a memory, a corner of your heart, or reminded you of something in your own life, leave a comment below so we can hear your true feelings. What do you think of Claire and Vincent's journey? If you were in their place, how would you act? Does this story make you reflect on the relationships, opportunities, or silent supporters in your own life? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss emotional stories like this from Underworld Love Stories. And if you feel this story deserves to be shared, send it to someone you care about. Perhaps someone out there needs to hear a story like this to continue their own journey. Thank you for spending your precious time with us until the very end of this tale. We wish all viewers good health, a peaceful life full of joy, and the ability to find light even in the darkest moments. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video from Underworld Love Stories. Wishing you a day filled with serenity and grace.